It is 6:02 p.m. Good evening, everyone, commissioners, members of the audience, and Happy New Year. This is the January 8th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. And I'd like to call the meeting to order at, well, it's now 6:03. Well, we will be reading the Native Land Acknowledgement Statement, and I'll read that again tonight. We wish to acknowledge that Tempe is the homeland of the Native people who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. These ancestral lands of the O'odham, known as the Pima, Peepash, known as the Maricopa, and their ancestors extend far beyond our city. This land continues to be spiritually connected to the O'odham of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community and the Gila River Indian community. We accept the responsibility of stewarding those places and solemnly pledge to consider this commitment in every action. Okay, we will take a roll call for commissioners today. Please, do you mind doing that, Dr. Lechner?
Not a problem. Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Vice Chair Fackler.
Here.
Commissioner Karuka.
Here.
Commissioner Lamp.
Here.
Commissioner Melcher. She's indicated she's absent. Commissioner Justice.
I'm here.
Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Chair Woodson.
Here.
Okay, 7 members present, 2 absent. We have quorum.
Thank you. All right, proceeding on to agenda item 1, call to audience. And do we have anyone today? Okay, so no audience members. So moving on then to the approval of the December 11th, 2024 meeting minutes. Commissioners, you have the copy of your minutes in your packet. And if you have reviewed that, do you have any comments or edits for the minutes?
Commissioner Davis here. I have 2 small comments and, well, 1 comment and a small edit. On
Yes.
page, excuse me, page 2, item number 3, approval of agenda. That first sentence is a little unclear, and I recommend that you change it to Vice Chair Fackler requested to move agenda item 6 to agenda item 4 in that first part of the sentence. And then I had 1 typo on page 6, last paragraph. The museum manger should be the museum manager.
It was a December meeting, so
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Any further edits or comments?
This is Commissioner Williams. I have a couple other comments as well.
Yes, please.
Page 1, under item number 1, regarding the Donnell Plaza. I don't know if that's the correct name for the plaza, where the audience member had a discussion. I don't know if that's spelled correctly.
Danelle is how
Okay.
it should be spelled.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Sure,
that
yeah.
it was caught. It was correct. Okay. My other comment would be on page 3, item 5. Let's see. 2, 3. Bottom. The first big paragraph is 1. The 8th sentence where the HPC will received. I don't know if that's will receive a request for review and recommendation. And on page 6, the first sentence, I don't know if that's CHP or the CIP, the acronym. I don't know which one's correct.
CIP should
Okay.
be, yeah.
All right.
Correct.
Well, then just the one comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further comments? Okay, hearing none, then we'll take a vote to approve the minutes. We could, yeah, or a motion. Yeah, I'll take a motion first. If I could get a motion, please.
I move approval of the minutes with the corrections as announced.
All right, thank you. And a second?
Second.
Very well. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
That was fun.
Got to get some exercise tonight. All right, moving on then to approval of agenda. Unless there's any issues with the agenda, then I will just move to have the agenda approved, and we will move on with the program here. All right, our one item tonight on the list, agenda item 4, update by Logan Simpson on,
Chair Woodson, I
yes,
apologize to interrupt. I just want to disclose that I am employed by Logan Simpson. I was not involved with this project. I understand it's just an update and that this commission isn't taking any action, so there's no
Correct.
need to recuse myself. I
Correct.
just wanted to double
Yeah, and you
check.
can, if, once there's a, motion to approve or an item to approve, you could always certainly recuse yourself if you feel more comfortable later.
Cool.
if you'd like to.
Thanks, Zach.
You're welcome.
all right, thanks for pointing that out. And before I let you proceed, I apologize. I wanted to state for the record that we do have a new commission member ex officio attending tonight online, taking the place of Brenda Abney. It's Miss Jen Sweeney, is that correct? Did I get her name correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I know she's online. I don't know if she can actually unmic, but welcome to the meeting. Very good. All right, and this is Mr. Colbank, correct?
Correct.
Thank you for coming, and please proceed
Yeah,
with your
thank you,
presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Wayne Colbank. I'm a landscape architect and I'm principal with Logan Simpson here in Tempe. And I am responsible for the management plan preparation for the Papago and Hayden Butte preserves. I'm accompanied this evening with 2 other individuals, which I know many of you know. John Southard, who's the former HPO for the city, and Dr. Chris Garrity. Let me advance the slide so you can see the name. Dr. Chris Garrity, who is the Cultural Resource Director in the Tempe office. He was responsible for developing the Class 3 survey and report that was prepared that I believe has been distributed to, or has been given to Dr. Lechner. So with that, as part of this presentation, what we want to do is give you somewhat of an overview of the management plan activities, and then ultimately get to some of the key recommendations that are in the management plan report, which has also been provided to Dr. Lechner. So just as part of the background, you can see here that we've had 3 workshops. These workshops are made up of 2 components, a 1-hour online workshop during the day, and on that same day in the evening, a 6 o'clock in-person workshop. So we've had 3 of those so far. We have the next one scheduled for February, just a little bit from now. And of course, our last communication with this group was in late 2023. So just to give you a sense, and I'll go a little further into some of the results of those surveys and the workshops. But I wanted to basically make sure that you understand that as part of the workshops and part of the planning, we always went back to the purpose of the preserve. This is language that comes out of the city code and the ordinances and the resolutions. And so to give people a background and a good sense of context for the workshops, we relied on this information. Specifically, we also provided specific language for each of the preserves. They have slightly different language, but it's all basically all intended to do the same thing. Excuse me. In addition, in the last workshop, workshop number 3, to provide again further context for the participants, we reviewed the land acknowledgement and demonstrated the city's commitment to the Native American tribes as it relates to the preserves. In terms of additional studies that Logan Simpson has done, we did the, as I mentioned, the Class 3 survey. That was done only for the Papago Preserve. It was not done for Hayden Butte Preserve. But you can see the survey findings there are 15 recorded sites or structures, 6 listed properties, either in the cities or the National Register. 3 determined eligible and 3 determined ineligible sites were found. And of course, in that document, like most Class 3 documents, are the recommendations for treatment. In addition to that, we did a traditional cultural property study, which is a different aspect of the cultural properties themselves. You can see the findings. They're basically 5 TCPs. They are related primarily to the archaeological sites that were found. Also, the report indicates that these preserved lands are traditional cultural landscapes forests, or PMIC, and the GRIC. And again, the TCP document has its own management recommendations within it. Now, just moving on now to the management plan itself, just a map that shows you the relationships, and this was the same map presented to the public of where the 2 preserves are located within the city. And as part of the studies, we also looked at other elements and factors and considerations, and we've mapped those, and I'm just going to go through a couple of those for you here, not all of them, but here you can see we mapped the various contemporary features. This happens to be Hayden Butte, the trails and trailheads, and then the different vegetation types and other resource types within them. That's all I'm going to show you relative to those, and I just want to make the point that we did the very same thing for the Papago Preserve. So we looked at a number of different resources in addition to the cultural resources. Now we came to, after having looked at all of that, we came to this idea that there are sub-areas within the preserves that have different characteristics that have some potential meaning and influence on how the maintenance and management activities should be undertaken. And I'll try to walk through that here briefly. If you look at, let's say on the left, this area H1, this is the southwest facing slope of Hayden Butte. It gets a lot of recreation use. It has very steep slopes. It has erosion challenges. It has nice views of downtown, but it is an area where there's a lot of concentrated activity. And as compared to H2, where you would, which is a much more natural, undeveloped portion and less frequently frequented, the management that might be needed for each one of those 2 is different. Now, if you jump over to Papago, the area P1 there at the bottom, which is the largest area, very, very similar to H1 in the fact that it's got all of those same characteristics. In addition to that, it includes a number of cultural sites and even some TCPs. And of course, H1 is within the TCP of the whole Hayden Butte. So you can see there are parallels here between the 2 locations, even though they are different and separated. Some of the other areas in P7, or I mean in Papago, like P7, that's actually the park, the Hallman Park with the lake. So you can see the maintenance and the activities that might need to go there are going to be different than in P1. So we wanted to bring this forward, and we use the term conservation because it's a proactive term, means that we're taking action to do something about this. And as we go forward here, going further into the management plan, we established the management goal here in white. You can read it, but basically it says we're trying to preserve the preserves in a self-sustaining natural open space character honoring the site's resources and its cultural heritage and just its intrinsic value. And you can see we've added here this definition of conservation, again, trying to reinforce this point where we're going to take action to remedy some of these situations. Now, as part of the management plan, we came up with 14 different management objectives. And these are steps that are believed that if undertaken and undertaken well, will get us a long way to protecting and preserving the preserves. So the first one is an obvious one, which is to identify all the significant resources that are out there. So we know these areas have not been fully studied before or have been partially studied. So we wanted to make sure we got our hands around what is out there. Number 5, again, I'm just going to hit the yellow highlighted ones. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can look at those and read those in the management plan report itself. But number 5 is enter into an MOU with SRPMIC. We know ultimately some things are going to happen. We're going to need to work with the tribes, and so entering into an MOU and an agreement is a logical thing to do here. In the next batch here, number 6, we want to foster continuous, and we already have are engaged with SRPMIC, but continue to foster that so that there's a smooth transition and ability to communicate back and forth. Number 7 is to develop a trails plan. And where that comes into play is that we know right now that some of the trails, and there are a lot of trails, particularly in the Papago, south of Curry, a lot of trails that are crisscrossed out there. Some of them are identified, many of them are not, and some of them go through cultural sites. And so with a trails plan, which would assess which trails need to stay, which ones need to be moved, which ones need to be just gotten rid of, is what we're suggesting is an objective that would help in the process here of protecting the preserves. Number 8 is develop an education program. The idea here is that if people are made more aware of the resources, the significance, the importance of the preserves, they will, as they're out there or they're planning activities, will be more sensitive to those and will act more responsibly, potentially, in their actions and modify their actions accordingly as they are exploring and experiencing the preserves. Number 13 is to periodically assess the master plan goals and objectives. The idea here is this is really just some wording for adaptive management. If it's working, we keep it. If it's not working, we change it. And that's what number 13 is about, to keep that concept in mind as we develop and as the years go by. Number 14 is really just to try to continue to find those groups, those partnerships, there's funding, whatever it is that will help the city accomplish these goals and meet these objectives. Now, before we get to the recommendations, I want to back up just a little bit because what we're going to show you here is the kind of input that we got as part of the management plan. This also applies to the goal, the main goal of the project and the 14 objectives. But you see here that we've had 3 workshops attended in person by 143,000 people. Wow, that's a lot. 143. Sorry about that. And we did get through those online surveys, which happened at noon each of those days. We got about 579 responses, people telling us all kinds of things. I want this, I like this, don't do this. Lots of input of different kinds. And of course, Logan Simpson, as well as city personnel, did a lot of field investigations. We met with SRPMIC, lots of coordination. Community services, neighborhood services have all weighed in on different aspects of the management plan itself. And then of course, the DCC input that we received and the info that we received from this body back in 2023. So that's the kind of input that has gone into this that allowed us to make some of these recommendations, in addition to just our own observations that we think will help achieve these goals. Now, the recommendations, the first part is broken down into whether they're management recommendations or their maintenance recommendations. So you see here, the first one under management is basically repeating the objective. Prepare that MOU when the right time is to do that. The second one there about providing sensitive training, the idea is that everybody who has some hand in the preserves, whether they're doing planning, design, maintenance, whatever it is, needs some level of sensitivity training as before they go and do their work there as it relates to preserve. Again, down below, the education program, again, this is a management activity. It has to be promoted and developed by management. And then the trails plan, very similarly. These are management suggestions, although they are also just the repeat of the objective itself. Moving on, under maintenance, one of the things that becomes clear is that in this process, where now we have greater responsibilities, we're going to take more action as it relates to the preserves. It's not sure at this point, although it's suspected that there is not enough city personnel of the right kind or type to take on this role. So what we're suggesting as part of this management plan is that once these goals and objectives are all agreed upon, there be a study to try to figure out what really is the appropriate level of staff and resources that need to be done, that need to be taken into account. Similarly, for the petroglyph protection, is it good? Is it working? Is it not working? What do we need to do there? Specifically talking just about the petroglyphs. In another highlighted maintenance recommendation here is that we take a look at some of these temporary activities that go on. There are races, there are walks, there are other kinds of things that go on in the preserves that we don't feel have been post-activity have been really evaluated for what kind of an effect they might have on the preserve resources. So that's another area that can be looked at to see how those are working and whether or not there needs to be some change. Now, the last part, well, not the last part, but the next part of the management plan talks about improvements. What kind of improvements need to be made in the preserves? And this first slide you see here, these items pertain to both preserves. So we have both preserves, and then each one of them has their own individual steps that need to be taken. So the first one is develop a cohesive signage package. You can see by the images down below, depending on where you are, we got all kinds of different signage. It really needs to be more consistent. It probably needs to have more educational and understanding components to it. But that's an item that would need to be looked at to get that signage all up to speed. We know there's some out there right now that's in a pretty degraded condition. So next would be address the erosion control. It's most acute on Hayden Butte by far, but there is erosion in that area P1 that we talked about for the Papago. Now, for the Hayden Butte Preserve itself specifically, you can see there are two items at the bottom there. There are a couple unauthorized memorials. Those really should be removed. And then, of course, the A. That is a big issue. It needs to be assessed because there are concerns with the A. There is erosion around it. There's some safety concerns, particularly. And of course, just whether or not it is compatible with the preserve. All of those things need to be looked at and assessed as the plan is implemented. Related to the Papago Preserve specifically, the dirt jump area. We're all familiar with that. Again, the question is, what do we do with it? That needs closer scrutiny as to decide whether that stays or goes. And then secondly there, the Loma del Rio ruin, that treatment has been in place for probably 30 years. When I first was working with that, it needs updated. It needs probably a better treatment plan to preserve that site. Now, those are the basic recommendations. Again, you can read these in the management plan report. But what we did was, we also have a section in there about success. Because while we can identify all of these steps to be taken, the real question is, how will we know when we've achieved them? And so we set up here, and this is just an example, this only shows on the left 2 of the objectives, 8 and 10, as an examples here, to identify how we have identified the success criteria. So you notice on the left, number 8, it says provide a user education program. You can see we've assigned, and it's been discussed, that it's a high priority. The metric is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to give people more knowledge, more power, understanding of what the preserves are. What's the current status in the next block to the right? Well, there's very little signage, not a whole lot going on. So, that's what's happening now. The success criteria, and the way it's been written here, is if we had the installation of upgraded signage within a year, that would be considered success. So every one of those 14 objectives that we identified has a very similar success criteria lined out for it. Now, whether the success criteria is exactly what we're suggesting is what, the city, or whether this commission finds appropriate, maybe it's longer, maybe it's shorter, maybe the priorities you think differently. Those are all things we're looking for input relative on. But all of those have been defined in that way so that we know in the end whether or not we've achieved that objective the way we've defined it. So lastly, within the management plan report, we have the identification of potential partners and potential funding sources. Of course, we're still in process, so not all of these have been finalized, and we're still looking at them. Some of them are more or less appropriate, but as we move forward, we'll be able to nail those down as we finalize the management plan. So to give you the next steps, you can see here the Class 3 and the TCP reports have been submitted. We have our DCC meeting next month. We are planning on having workshop number 4, which will be the presentation of the final management plan in February, late February, a final report sometime in March, and likely a council work session in April. That's a tentative date scheduled by Alex. So that's where we are. That's the update we want to share with you. We're certainly here to answer your questions, provide you what other information you might need. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Colbank. Very comprehensive, I think, and appreciate the effort by your staff at Logan Simpson. I thought it's very well presented. I'm going to let other commissioners pose any questions or comments first before I provide my feedback. So commissioners, if there's anyone who would like to ask any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I might ask that the opportunity for John and or Chris to offer any other comments before we're finished.
Of course.
Appreciate that.
Certainly.
And-
If welcome to come forward at this time, if you'd
You
like
guys
to.
ready now? I'm not trying to
Yes.
manage the meeting here.
Good evening, everyone. Chair Woodson, members of the commission. I'm John Southard. Should you have any questions about the built environment aspects in Apico Preserve or certainly Hayden View Preserve, I'd be happy to speak to that.
And most of you know me, Chris Garrity, Commissioner, all commissioners and Chair Woodson. I am available to address questions about the Class 3 report and to the extent that permissible, the TCP's report. At least I'm familiar with the general management recommendations, although I can't convey a lot of the specific information, right? Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, commissioners, we have a pretty extensive plan here to review. If there's any questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand and pose your questions. Yes, Vice Chair.
One quick question related to ASU's fence. What's the purpose of that fence? Is there a likelihood that somebody fall off the cliff, or is it protecting? Keeping people
John
out
may
of the
have a better
stadium?
answer
What?
than I have.
Chair Woodson, Vice Chair Fackler, as I was told at one point when I was employed by the city as historic preservation officer, it was erected because there was a concern that those in the preserve would access the ASU-owned portion of the butte to observe, watch football games, and also set off fireworks and other things. I cannot say whether or not that is factual, but that was the general understanding that was shared with me.
Interesting. It, in your reports, you mentioned it a number of times, and recommendation that it be painted is one of the opportunities. But, you know, that thing's been up there forever. And I know of no instances of vandalism or theft or anything else that occurred on that side of the butte, but it really is a scar. And I know the tribes do not like it, never have. Seems like that one's a kind of a no-brainer, but I'd sure like to hear from ASU as to why it's there to begin with, and are they really against taking it away? But, you know, the A on the side of the mountain, that one's going to be tough, but that fence should be a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
great report, by the way.
Thank you,
Well,
sir.
maybe the discussions about the A might lead into a discussion of the fence and allow something to happen there.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioners, other commissioners, anyone else? Questions or comments?
I have a couple of comments.
Yes, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you for bringing the management plan forward to us. And one question I did have about the unauthorized memorials, I don't know if the city has experienced any depositing of cremation into the preserves, or have been notified of such things, because I know that at the South Mountain Preserve they are experiencing that type of disposition, you know, of cremated remains, historic. And I think that that should be included into the management plan, because just to have it now in place, you know, will assist the city in any way of any future, you know, placements of cremated remains. Because, you know, just looking at the Papago Preserve, you know, although it looks like it's heavily attended, you know, but there could be some areas in which, you know, no one may not know what to look for, you know, and especially in Hidden Butte, you know, if there's like small crevices of rocks, you know, or boulders or things like that, that could be a place for people to, you know, deposit the cremated remains. So I just wanted to bring that comment. And my second comment would be, I know that ThinkNet is becoming a very severe issue within the state, and I noticed that it wasn't included in here, but I think maybe that should be placed in as well, if there's any areas within both the preserves of any notice of StinkNet, or if not, but still, it's, you know, a really major concern. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams, I'm a little surprised to think that's not identified because I know we had it in there before. We'll go back and we'll check that, but we can definitely identify it because it is one of the two primary noxious weeds that we're dealing with in open natural space areas.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Elliott.
This is just more of a comment. I really appreciated this idea of signage with QR codes that could be scanned for educational purposes. I thought that that was insightful. This is one of the places where I kind of first realized the long cultural history, right? And so I think that there might be some desire to move some of that education off-site, right? But I think keeping as much as you can on-site is a smart thing to do. And with QR codes, it's not invasive is the word that's popping to mind, but it wouldn't kind of interrupt the preserve. And I guess I would just say you have identified the NEH as a source of funding that could be useful for something like that. And I hope that you would give the relevant tribes the opportunity to convey their history directly in a medium like that.
Chair Woodson, Commissioner Lamb. Thank you. Yes, that's certainly something that is a priority as relates to seeking tribal input.
I'll just say one other thing relative to the education program. We've thought of it not only as being in the field, but in other places online. Particularly if you go to look at, just look online for, Hayden Butte Preserve, there's not a lot of information about it. So whatever information you can upload that people can get their hands on before they even show up is a great educational opportunity. So it doesn't all have to happen in the field.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner.
So what's the possible action after council work study? Will this get implemented, this master plan, or what could happen?
What could happen
What's
with the management plan?
with the master plan? Will it be get implemented with bond passing?
Well, I'm not that familiar with it, but in general, the assumption is that there are a number of steps. The city will be taking a look at the report, trying to prioritize and what funding is available to sort of determine what the actual next steps are for implementation. That's an overview of what I know about it. There may be more to it, and there is obviously a lot more to it than that, but in general, with all of the recommendations, somebody's going to have to sort through that, figure out where we start. And it is, there are opportunities to start in different places at the same time, but it's all going to come down to funding and the partnerships and other sources of money that can be obtained to make it happen. So it's not clear how this is going to roll out, but it's more than likely going to take some time and not maybe be a linear process per se.
Okay, thank you. I hope this happens because one weekend I walked, I didn't know even name, but the trail along the canal by the freeway, is it Loma del Rio trailhead, I guess. I didn't see anybody there, and it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
But it was kind of spooky because there was nobody. So all these findings, there's so many actually resources and something to learn about it. I had no idea, but it was beautiful and was not used. I was kind of spooked, so I really walked really fast. But that was like not very known to, I think, residents. And Tempe doesn't really have like a nature preserve area, so I think this area should be really enhanced. And it's a great opportunity in your report, I hope, or master plan.
I will say you'll
that
see in the management plan
realize.
report, one of the objectives is to raise the visible profile
Yes,
of the
absolutely.
preserves, again, as a way to create more interest and to have people understand more fully what resources there are there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to just add a few other things, but again, first of all, applaud all of you and your staff for putting this together. I think it's very nicely presented and written, very comprehensive. I mean, honestly, if I had any critique, it would be it's just so comprehensive that it's kind of like, where do you start? And just that. And so that kind of gets to a couple of my questions. So, do you have any data at this point on, for example, like what's the current budget and staffing and resources that are dedicated to these two preserves? And then do you even have a ballpark at this point as to what you're proposing for any kind of budgetary or resource increases?
We, Logan Simpson, do not have the information of what resources are available. In our discussions with the city staff, the common statement was, we don't have enough personnel, we don't have enough to accomplish even what we're doing now necessarily. So we don't have any of that information. There's just a strong sense it's lacking. As to what the new numbers would be, what the new requirements might be, that would be as part of the recommendation for a fuller study that was not within the scope of this kind of a management plan. So sorry, we don't have
Sure.
any new numbers that we can offer.
Very well. Yeah, I figure that'll be, partly worked out further in the process as this moves ahead. And I did see later on down in the lower sections in your, graphing or your table that you do have sort of low, medium, high priority items. But, even some of those, I wonder if it might be possible to add maybe a little more about like maybe what are some critical needs. I mean, this is all. I'm sure that part of the purpose of this is to provide just what you did. But if I could say anything that I would maybe suggest for further addition is to maybe try to pull out even more like, here's what we really see as critical needs for these preserves moving forward in the next, 3 to 5 years, something like that. That might be useful for the staff and commissioners like us and others to, get a better feel, since you all are way more familiar with this now than we are. So that would really be my only suggestion for an addition. The other thing, and forgive me if I missed this, I didn't read every word, but do you have any data on like numbers of visitors to these two preserves?
No. It's still part of the trying to get our hands around what is going on out there. But as far as I know, except for the temporary events where there may be some information, I'm not sure that there is actually any empirical data as to what the visitation is.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, they're open access and, pretty much anybody can kind of walk in there. So that's not surprising, but I don't even know if the city or anyone has any kind of way of, generating that kind of numbers. And it might be interesting to have that kind of information here. Those were my main sort of points that I wanted to put across, and really appreciate the effort here. And I think this will certainly be useful to help the city kind of guide, where resources ought to be placed for this. And, some of these are going to be probably a little bit difficult. A couple were mentioned, like with the A, I mean, that'll be certainly a big discussion, I'm sure, debate about some of those things. But I appreciate it because, I mean, from a conservation point of view, I understand that recommendation. So it'll be interesting to see what the discussion becomes on some of those items like that. So thank you all very much. And we have, Vice Chair, yes?
One more. Who's responsible for this? I mean, yeah, who's going to be the responsible party, department, whatever, for the implementation of this? Is it community development, community services, parks department?
Parks. It's a large, yeah, parks. Parks.
Right now, it's parks.
Yeah, no, I mean, that could, of course change in the future, depending on what, management would prefer to do, but yeah, currently it's
And
it's
from
Parks.
Parks' standpoint, how involved were they with putting this together?
They were well represented at all of the meetings and
Okay.
all of the discussions.
And
We
do
met.
they know that they are the implementation tool for this?
Very much so, yeah,
I think so.
yeah, yeah.
And where are we at, or where are they at? This has been two years in the making. Where are they at as far as CIP? Have they started to generate any proposals for the CIP?
In terms of the preserves themselves, you mean?
Right,
or-
you know, look at this
Yeah.
matrix and you're
Mhm.
talking 1 or 2 years, the signage is done and, you know, everything's green and
Yeah.
we're happy. But I know it's a 5-year CIP.
Parks has put together, certain projects within the CIP that would go towards supporting recommendations within this management plan. Also, community development has one for kind of a supplementary, designed to supplement what Parks is doing. It's specifically for restoration of Loma del Rio. And that was an item that was actually will be funded by the bond. And there's also one specifically, I believe, relating to the butte that has to do with kind of assisting with erosion control and things, some of the things that Mr. Colbank was mentioning. So yeah, it's Parks that's primarily, has the managerial role over the preserves. These are preserves, but they're also parks, so they're within the parks, under the parks department. And Parks is largely kind of tasked with managing the funds associated with that. But having talked with the head of Parks, Alex Jovanovic, I mean, he's very, very in tune with these items and is very, both very knowledgeable about, I think, the plan itself. He's been deeply involved in those discussions with Logan Simpson, with the tribes, and I've had discussions with Alex with the tribes, as well as some of the funding, recognizing some of the additional funding needs. And so for Historic Preservation Office, we're really kind of working as kind of a supplementary role. I see my role as one where we're assisting Alex and his Parks Department team in helping to implement some of these items, because obviously there's a big historic preservation angle to all this, and so Alice has been very good about keeping me involved in the process, and he'll continue to do that. I know.
Zach, do you know at this point, does Alex or the Parks group have a dedicated group for maintenance and whatnot of these two preserves? Because this is a whole lot different than maintaining Clark Park.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the education and the techniques involved with implementation of this management plan really speaks to a dedicated group within the Parks Department, led by the director of the Parks Department,
right, as
the mouthpiece and the one primarily responsible for getting it done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be a huge job to, essentially, we're talking about deferred maintenance on this for umpteen decades. And that's got to be turned around.
Right.
And hopefully in short order, we start putting this out to the public, including this management plan. Their expectations are going to rise, especially those, how many ever 1,000 people that use these facilities. I know every time I'm out there, I see people. I mean, there's not 200 people, I'm not jogging around them on the trails or anything like that, but it's being used and to a certain extent abused. I mean, we've done some things out there that shouldn't have been done, like those bike ramps. Now we've got fat people like me able to do it with electric bikes. But luckily we nipped that in the bud as it got there. But this is a huge project. I hope he knows what he's up to.
No, I believe he does, and I agree with the need to deliver.
Good luck, Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Vice
you,
Chair.
Vice Chair. I had one last question about the funding chapter that you all had. Are these kind of typical, I'm ignorant of this, is this kind of typical funding sources that cities would take advantage of, or are these like actual practical, opportunities for the city to do, or maybe just educate us a little more? I mean, there's quite a few in here, and potentially quite a few, dollars in there. So I don't know if this is something you feel like, is this something the city might even be able to pursue with these funding opportunities?
Well, we, just to be clear, we've looked at each of those grant programs. They all have language in them that suggests that they would be applicable to some degree, and they're not all equally to the same degree applicable to this. Most grant applications are not geared towards open space and things like that. So you're going to stretch a little bit some of those grant application opportunities to get that funding. But even as this plan becomes implemented, I think some of these grant sources will want to participate and may actually come forward and say, hey, I want to be part of this, and offer whatever they can offer. But it's still, these are all, they're not mainstream necessarily, all of them, programs. And or specific to this kind of resource.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Unless there's any further questions. And yes,
I have one
Commissioner.
more comment under the funding. I know that some of the surrounding municipalities look into the 12% gaming grant. And I know that's heavily used for, I'm starting to see that a lot of them are utilized for a lot of the educational signage and trail signages. So that could be another source of
Absolutely.
funding.
That would be a perfect one for the signage components. So we will we'll note that in the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, unless there's any further questions, I think we'll take this as a update FYI, and we appreciate your time tonight, and good luck with the rest of the process, and we look forward to seeing the final result.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. All right, moving on. We're down to chair and staff updates and announcements. And I do not have any updates or announcements, so I will hand this over to the staff.
Oh, just a few quick updates. Just want to let you know that the Phase 2 environmental survey assessment is continuing this week at the Hayden Flour Mill, finishing up this week. There's also at the same time, well, actually, I believe over the weekend, there was the Phase 2 environmental survey assessment carried out at the Gonzalez Martinez House site. So we've got a lot of environmental work happening within a very short distance. Both of those efforts were funded by Environmental Protection Agency brownfields grants that the city applied for and received. And the kind of information included in these assessments, the kind of data that's yielded will really provide helpful information for these sites as a site's redevelopment. So it's really important that work is done. So that's good. I'm glad to see those moving forward. And then wanted to mention too that the city was able to hire a historic preservation intern, and that was thanks to a tribal gaming grant from the Gila River Indian community. So thank you to the Gila, Raylan and the rest of the Gila River Indian community for that. This is a 12-month half-time appointment, and so this person, her name is Victoria Clark. She's a ASU graduate with a BA and a master's in history. Excellent candidate. You'll have the opportunity to meet her at subsequent meetings, and she'll be helping me out, just complete various tasks in the historic preservation office, and then also just learn about the field of historic preservation and archaeology at the municipal level. So it's a good opportunity all around, both for her and for the city. And then last kind of main thing is the neighborhood awards are kind of in the nomination period is open for those, the city neighborhood awards. You'll recall that last year the Tempe Historic Preservation Foundation received the HP, or the Historic Preservation Award. So I'll send you an email with the nomination form, and if you feel so moved, any it can be a person, it can be an organization. Feel free to nominate them if you feel that they're worthy. And February meeting, it's potentially something that's potential, but we have no agenda items as of yet for that meeting. So that's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to ask two questions, if you don't
Sure.
mind. One, the prior meeting in December,
Yep.
the RFP for the Hackett House project.
Yes.
Where do we stand with that?
So there will be another discussion of that. There's been a lot of internal kind of staff and managerial discussions. There's going to be an additional discussion of that at a upcoming e-session of council e-session. So we'll get more direction in terms of what the RFP will look like based on that. I think Chair and the Commission should be aware that Chair Woodson and Vice Chair Fackler submitted a letter essentially kind of reiterating a lot of the concerns that the Commission had brought up at the last meeting in regard to some of the proposals for the upcoming kind of reissuance of the RFP. And City Manager, I can assure you, because I spoke with her about it, was very appreciative of those recommendations, very much taking them seriously, and that information has been communicated to Mayor and Council. So that will help them in their decision-making process and their recommendations. So, but I will, when I have more information that I'm able to provide to you, again, the proceedings of e-sessions are confidential, but when I do have publicly available information, I will happily provide you with a further update on that.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. And we look forward to hearing what the further decisions are on that.
Me too.
And then if you're able to, I'm not sure, since the previous meeting, we heard from Rob Moore about Danell Plaza, and we've had a little side discussion with him. Is there anything that is worth updating the commission about that, or is this something we're going to see on an agenda coming forward, or what do you think?
I mean, there's been ongoing kind of redevelopment efforts at Danell Plaza, the kind of mid-century shopping center. The city owns part of the a section of Danell Plaza, a strip of Danell Plaza, and so there are ongoing redevelopment kind of efforts, and so I think at this point, and it'll probably be some months from now, but what we'd like to do is see about getting the developer to come before HPC, just make a presentation, just kind of give you some insights into what their plans are and get some feedback. There's nothing designated or classified as historic eligible within Danell Plaza. The most of it is was determined by, I don't know if you remember the 2022 survey of historic resources in the city of Tempe. It was completed by, largely written by Mark Vinson and Thomas Jones, who's now of Logan Simpson. Determined that most of Donnell Plaza has lost historic integrity. There's a few buildings kind of at the outskirts that they recommended as being potentially eligible for the National Register that has not been determined officially by the State Historic Preservation Office. So this would just be a kind of there's no specific purview that the HPO or HPC has over Donnell Plaza or projects within it. However, thought it would be worthwhile for the HPC to just have the opportunity to hear more about the project and provide some feedback, and just make suggestions perhaps that could, help any new development be compatible with those potentially historic buildings at least. So that's where we are, but no date on that yet. It looks like it could be several months. So, but I'll keep you informed when I know more.
Very well, thank you. All right, any further updates or announcements? All right, hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, and Chair, by the way, that was my mistake last time. You can just adjourn the meeting. You don't have to.
Very good. All right. Yes. Then I'll move to adjourn tonight at 7:04 p.m. And thank you all very much for your time. And yeah, it's relatively quick. So thank you, everyone.